All right, family. It's September the 8th. We got a great show for you guys here today. The NALC has started the internal collective bargaining process. We have 3 guests on the show, and they're all going to give their opinions. We're going to have a lot of dialogue back and forth about the process, about the upcoming contract, and how can we accomplish our goals as a union. And FYI, at some point in this show, we are going to mention the word strike. All right, welcome to another edition of Mike Drop Mondays. My name is Mike. Today is September the 8th, and we wanted to have a little discussion regarding our announcement that the contract bargaining process has begun. We have some guests with us here today from the great state of Illinois, so I will let them introduce themselves, and then I'll let you guys know a little bit more about the program for today. Who wants to go first? Nobody. You guys raising your hands? Oh yeah, we are going to raise our hands. we were talking about not having everyone talk at the same time, so I didn't know that we were going to go into raising hands. But if we are, I think Brother Moulton had his hands up first. Go ahead.
I'm Jim Moulton. I'm the Secretary of Branch 219 in Aurora, Illinois, and I'm a Step B rep for near on 9 years.
Awesome. And I'm Ronnie Morgan from Branch 11, Chicago. I am the Vice President.
And Ronnie, they spelled your name right on the screen. I think that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, they know what they're doing.
Real professional operation here.
Right.
All right. Mr. Thorpe?
I'm Ross Thorpe. I am the Treasurer and Steward of Branch 318 in Moulton, Illinois.
Okay. So, obviously the start of contract negotiations, or what our strategy is for contract negotiations, is on the top of every letter carrier's mind. Officially, the contract negotiations begin next year with the Postal Service in February. I think maybe February 22nd, something like that, 90 days prior to the expiration of the contract. That's per the law, per the Postal Reorganization Act of 1970. But prior to even getting into negotiations with the Postal Service, we have begun the process internally to the NALC. We've broken out into various committees. There are 6 different committees that members of the Executive Council are part of. And then there is 3 other committees which are being called rank and file committees. There's one committee of union officers. There's one committee of grievance handlers, like union stewards for the most part. And then there's just a basic rank and file committee. Those committees will start working in about a week. They're going to be out at the Maritime Institute, gathered for several days in mid-September. I'm reading from the NALC website. And it talks about the 3 different groups. And they will go through a similar review process to the Executive Council bargaining subcommittees and offer valuable input on potential proposals from their various perspectives. So that's the plan there. NALC also announced that the National Rap Session will take place this year in Cleveland, Ohio. That is November 21st to the 23rd. You have like a welcome reception on the 21st. You have classes all day on the 22nd, and then the rap session itself will take place on November 23rd in Cleveland, Ohio. So, brothers, let's see what are you guys' initial questions when you got this information. Who wants to go first? And Jim, you're not muted. If you wanted to be muted, I don't know, but we can hear a little background from you. I don't know if that means you got to go first, but
I could go first if you want. Sure.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think the membership is obviously a little disgruntled given that they voted down the last contract. I think what we want to see as the membership is a break in the cycle of mediocre raises and not putting too much on Brother Renfro. The truth is we've had pretty mediocre raises for an extended period of time in the contract. It's been a cycle of mediocre raises since pretty much the early 80s, when was the last time we got a really substantive percentage raise. And I don't know that we can figure out from these committee assignments why that's going to happen again, but it looks like the process hasn't really changed in any fundamental way. I don't know that the process needs to change in a fundamental way as regards, committee assignments and things like that. But I do think that it would be really helpful that we need to change our mindset perchance going into arbitration. And I think that if we want some real change, that the Postal Service needs to fear that something other than mediocrity might lead to labor unrest. Frankly, I think if it goes to interest arbitration, which seems reasonably likely to me at least, that the arbitrator needs to fear that continued mediocrity is going to lead to labor unrest. I think that's what it would take to move the chains on this thing in any substantive way. I don't know obviously there's a balancing act there. We can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but at the same time, I think that's how we really need to move the change in my view. And I'm not sure that we have the mindset for it, but I hope that we do.
Okay, that is, man, starting off with a bang. I love that. Although I don't know if you credit our substantial win in 1999. I thought that was a substantial raise, but maybe you don't credit that one, huh?
Well, you know what? Maybe they glossed over that in Carriers to the Common Cause. I wasn't here in 1999.
Well, that was with the Fleischie Award when we got the upgrade to what at that time was level 6, separated ourselves from the clerk. So at the time, going back and reading, well, I was around then, but going back and reading the postal record articles, it did seem like it was a substantial win for us as a union. Of course, we were already generally well paid, and that was just an upgrade on top of our general good payment. But since 2013, that has not been the case. You're generally well paid at the top of the scale, but not at the bottom of the scale. Did you have any questions, Jim, about the process before we go to the next person? I'm definitely going to come back to some of this stuff.
Well, obviously there's a lot of room for improvement in our contract, but it seems like I'd like to see just some functional changes. They did some tweaks to Article 8. Wasn't really what I was looking for. I'm a little concerned about implementation at this point, which I haven't really seen very much of at Step B, but I'm really concerned what this equitability is going to look like for the first round of equitability grievances. I'm not sure how they're going to go about implementing their automatic payments for people over 1260 and things like that. I think there's still room for some tweaks there for just quality of life changes, as the gamers say, just to make this job just an easier job to do, an easier, less confrontational function. I saw another JSOV this morning about people arguing over I needed this much time, and no, you're going to finish it in this much time, and then it escalated. I'd like to see some quality of life changes and not just changes on that. And I'm just curious what you think about the likelihood of that.
Okay. I'll get to that. I want to hear from everyone else, and then took some notes. Ronnie, what do you got, man? What do you think about the process, and what are you looking for? Jim, you gotta mute yourself,
Got it.
or they gotta mute you. I don't know.
Yeah,
Ronnie.
yeah. So well, I guess what I know about the process is that we kind of do this every go around. Every time we lead into contract negotiations, we try to get together, look at resolutions, proposals that the body brings forward at a national convention, and then figure out how to implement those things. But um, I'm not sure that much of that really finds its way into the contract. Um, you know, the committees, the people on them, I know a lot of them. I think they're very capable people, and I'm sure they come up with great ideas. It's just getting that into the contract. I don't know how it translates to real language. But then when we finally do get contract language, the biggest problem outside of the meager wage increases is compliance. That's a huge issue for the members of my branch. I mean, we've been flooded with grievances because it's just there's no attempt by management to learn the contract, to know what the rules are, and to follow them. And they just they keep pushing the issues and flooding the grievance process. And people are tired. People are losing faith in our ability to enforce what we see in black and white in front of us, and how we know that things are supposed to work and they don't work that way. It's a great level of frustration, in addition to not being paid well. So imagine not being paid well, and then all of your rights get stepped on every day, all day. Um, I'd like to see us figure out a way to get some real contract compliance, and I haven't seen it yet.
All right, appreciate that, brother. Ross, what do you got, man?
Well, a couple things really. I mean, just I how were the individual rank and file carriers chosen for these committees? Like that's kind of something. And who are the rest of them across the country, and how do we go about what kind of input are they actually going to have on the committees? Because like if they're going to do their own thing and have their own committees and talk about changes that they want to make to the national agreement, how much influence are they going to have if, say, they go to you, Mike, and you're dealing with Article 12, and someone has decided, hey, this is what we want to do with Article 12? Like, are you guys going to have the overwhelming majority vote, or to say, hey, that's not something we can do? Like, what instructions are they given? Like, what is their role going to be? Because this is sort of a new thing too. Like, we don't have a lot of experience with just rank and file members who don't work at headquarters bargaining for the national agreement, and are the people that we always make the resolutions at the national convention. And I think this is kind of a way to like circumvent that, seeing as we don't have a national convention. But are these people going to actually have a say? Are they going to have a vote? Are they going to have when we all sit down at the bargaining table and say someone's worked on Article 12, and I'm just saying that, Mike, because you're on Article 12. But are you guys going to call those subcommittees of the rank and file and say, here's what was proposed to us? What do you guys think about that? Or is it just going to be, no input after the initial, here's our suggestions, and then that's it? And then I know you were talking about how even the business agents and the executive staff and all that got to choose what committee they were on. Are we sure that the people working on these committees have the expertise to be working on those particular committees, if that makes sense? Or do we know that all of the people working on Article 16 deal with grievances, dealing with discipline? Do we know that those people have expertise in those areas? Like, how confident can we be as a membership to know that the people representing us on these committees know what they're talking about.
Okay, so let me try to work my way backwards on some of the questions you guys had. So you have on the committee, so the executive council is 28 people. Everyone wasn't there, so there may be some names that are not identified. If you go to the NALC website, there's a news and information piece dated September the 4th, titled NALC Executive Council Meets and Continues Collective Bargaining Preparations. And in there, it breaks down the people that on the executive council, at least, that have been assigned to the various committees. And we all picked, for the most part. There was a little bit of moving around, but anyway, you're just kind of saying that, hey, I would be interested in working on this. I mean, you figured these are people that mostly business agents and national officers that handle grievances and have a extensive amount of contractual knowledge. So I think to answer your question, are those the right people? I would say yes. Those would be the right people to look at the issues. And so the way we're doing the committees is you have our resolutions going back to the 1970 convention. Every 2 years we have a convention, and there's resolutions for bargaining to come out of those, out of each convention. So we get a list of those that apply to I'm on the committee of Article 7, Article 12, Article 26. What are the resolutions that apply to those articles, right? So that's number one. Then you look at the other unions in the post office, their contracts. So what language does the APWU have in Article 12, for example? So you look through all of that and see what might be, just to kind of give you ideas and things of what you would want to propose and make ideas about. Then you go through the whole JCAM language to see where there's things that might not be working right now, where there's room for improvement, that kind of thing. As of yet, President Renfro has indicated, and this is something new, like you indicated, Ross, we had not done in the past. And so how exactly it'll work, we don't really know, but President Renfro has indicated that he would like for those other three committees, what's called the rank and file committees, to come up with proposals regarding anything regarding the contract. And then I guess if they have proposals, they could submit it to the appropriate committee and say, here's what we're thinking. Or like you said, there can be some back and forth. If one of the rank and file committees says, hey, we got something we want to talk about pertaining to the uniform program, maybe my committee on pertaining to Article 26 can set up a meeting with that, with that committee and say, hey, what do you guys got? Here's what we have. What have you guys been working on? That kind of thing. So President Renfro also indicated that he will be doing some surveys out to the members. So any member that wants to have input into the process will be able to complete a survey or, say their opinion on whatever. I don't know the exact format of that. But the whole idea is to allow for the maximum amount of people to have input into what our bargaining proposals are. And I hadn't even thought about what you were saying, Ross, that maybe because we're not having a convention. I mean, normally you would have implementation of a new contract, then you have a gathering of the union, which is our convention, and then you start again in contract negotiations. But this time, our contract was implemented March 21st of this year, and we're going to begin negotiations February of next year, but our convention is not until August of next year. So this may kind of fill that gap a little bit, as you say, but we'll see how that plays out. What are we going to accomplish here? I think we're going to have a very extensive list of proposals and ideas on how to make our contract better for letter carriers. I will tell you guys that last time when we went through a bargaining process, and this was just internal to the NALC, right? We began the process, as far as shaking hands with the Postal Service in February, I think it was February 22nd of 2023. When we did that, we didn't break off into committees with the Postal Service. we broke off into our own internal committee, similar to the setup that you're seeing right now. Of course, that was after official negotiations had began, so it eats into that 90-day time frame. But by the end of March, and most of us in the middle of March, so maybe like a month into the process kind of thing, or maybe 6 weeks into the 90-day process, we had come up with all of our proposals. You know, we spent a lot of time. We have more time now because we're starting earlier, but that time we worked pretty hard to get forth all those proposals. And so we had over 200 proposals that we submitted internally to our president and or our main bargaining table team, whatever. So this time you have more avenues and more time to gather more proposals and get those things to the president and to the main bargaining team. But what we don't have yet is any type of idea of where the Postal Service is at in bargaining, like in collective bargaining. Collective means working with them to resolve the problems. And so, like Ronnie, you bring up compliance, contract compliance specifically, right? And so the first question I would have is the Postal Service interested in fixing the contract compliance issue, right? And the answer is almost assuredly no. And will it be even worse by the time we get there next year? Probably. And if you just look at the grievance procedure and the issues in the grievance procedure, which are mainly contract compliance and delays in the process, right? Those are the two big issues, I think, right now in the grievance process. And you look at those, and despite any effort that we have done, now President Renfro promises that he is going to file a national grievance on the issue of, the dispute resolution process memorandum not being adhered to by the Postal Service. He's been threatening that for a while now, but it hasn't happened. But regardless of that happening or not happening, the Postal Service has clearly indicated that they have zero interest in solving any issues with the grievance process. And to me, that's where you look at history, and we don't have to go back very far, but just look at the last round of contract negotiations. If you don't change anything, you're just repeating history over and over again. And so what happened last time is when we entered into the negotiations with the Postal Service, they were not interested in resolving, let's say, hostile work environments. Let's say the uniform program or the uniform issues. Let's say the grievance process. Let's say the hiring and retention, they, had some interest, right? That's how we ended up with the NERP. They had an interest in actually solving that. Whether or not the NERP does anything to solve the retention problem, we don't know. But at least you can see, based on the results, here's where the effort was by the Postal Service, or here where there was no effort by the Postal Service. So then you get into how do we get there? And so Jim brings up arbitration. And last time, which was the ultimate in disrespect to the membership of the union, the president decided to implement the terms of the tentative agreement, despite us, resoundingly voting that thing down. So you don't anticipate that he's going to do that again, but you don't have any guarantee that he's not. But let's assume he doesn't. Does he have a strategy or an idea of how to win this stuff at arbitration? And traditionally, we have not taken forth non-economic issues in front of the arbitration panel. What the reasoning is behind that, there's different thoughts on that. But I can tell you that President Renfro is of the belief that it's not a good idea for us to take forth non-economic issues in front of the arbitration panel. And so we're stuck saying, and the president, just so it's very clear to every member of the union, the president runs the collective bargaining process. And the president has made it crystal clear that he plans to run this round of collective bargaining. And constitutionally, the president has that authority to make those decisions. Now, subject to whatever amendments or changes we want to make to the Constitution when we get to the convention in August. But, between February and August, the way the Constitution is written right now, the president has that authority. and plans to, walk in the authority that he has right now under the NALC Constitution. And so, what is his what would be his strategy to try to accomplish some of these things through arbitration? I don't think there is one now, but how could we get there? Jim, you bring up the issue of when you get into arbitration, does the arbitrator fear that something is going to happen? There's going to be some type of labor unrest, as if we get a status quo contract, right? Like if you go through the motions and give us a damn 1.3% and don't fix any of the problems, and we still got these hostile work environments, grievance process don't work, uniform program that's ridiculous, and we still have CCAs and we're not being paid, and we still got table 2, and so if you don't solve any of the problems, is any neutral arbitrator on the arbitration panel going to be worried about unrest? And the irony of the whole thing is that they went out on strike in 1970. It was illegal. And when they did that, they forced the change in the law. The change in the law came in August of 1970. The strike was in March of 1970. And the change in the law was what gave us the right to go in front of a neutral arbitration panel to achieve our collective bargaining goals. And it's in lieu of going out on strike, right? So you don't have to go out on strike, letter carriers. We have this arbitration process built into the law that keeps you from going out on strike. But then we're told by our leadership of our union that there's actually no way to accomplish our goals through the collective bargaining process up until including arbitration, and it's still illegal for you guys to go out on strike. So what is the answer? What is the solution? How do we get, where we need to be? I know that it's going to have to include some outside pressure. We have to figure out a way to get some leverage in this process where the Postal Service isn't just so comfortable sitting there screwing us, day after day, and just ignoring the whole collective bargaining process. And I personally, just so you guys know, I think that you can take these issues to arbitration. If you guys go back and look, or Sarah, if you can pull it up, last round of contract negotiations, I made this whole big ass list of things that are issues that need to get resolved in the contract, right? And almost none of them were, maybe one or two. I think the list was like 26 items or something. But I believe that you can take all of those items in the collective bargaining process, and you sit there with the Postal Service and you bring up these issues and you explain to them. So I don't know, you guys have been involved in local memorandum negotiations. It's interest arbitration. What is our interest? What is the Postal Service interest? And you get into a discussion with the employer. You say, okay, how is the employer winning with the current grievance procedure? You have issues backlogged that require the Postal Service to pay, back pay. Let's say you have an issue sitting there for 2 years and the person gets back pay for 2 years. How is that in the Postal Service interest to end up having to pay to have that liability sitting over their heads as the employer? Is it in the interest of the employee, of the letter carrier? No, it's not. So how can we work together to come up with a grievance procedure that works, that moves the grievance along, et cetera? That's just one example. You can talk about how much money they're paying in overtime and penalty overtime and super penalty overtime versus coming up with a solution to the staffing issues and trying to work collaboratively in doing that. I don't think the Postal Service would bite, because I think that they've gotten very comfortable just sitting there, saying, hey, we ain't gonna do shit. That's a you problem, you letter carriers, not a we problem. But you can document all of those discussions, and then you get into the interest arbitration panel and you say, look, we showed the Postal Service how it was in their interest to try to resolve some of these issues and disputes, make this a workplace that people actually like, that kind of thing. And we showed them this, and they refused to bargain with us in good faith. And so what I would do is, in addition to preparing those kind of notes and all that to take it in front of the interest arbitration panel. At the same time, I think it's in our interest to make those conversations open to the public and transparent. So you go back to the members of the union, you go back to the American public, and you say, we're having these discussions that are supposed to be collective, and we're the ones putting forth all the effort, and the other side is not putting forth any effort. They haven't come up with any proposals to fix the grievance process. They haven't come up with any proposals to fix the uniform issue. They haven't come up with any proposals to fix the issue of mandatory overtime, where a carrier is supposed to be able to work an 8-hour schedule, but they can't due to the staffing and retention issue. They haven't come up with any proposals to fix the hostile work environments. We got our members throwing up in the damn parking lot before they go into work. Make these issues public, organize and mobilize our membership in conjunction with other unions and the public and, the general public to put some pressure on the Postal Service to actually engage in real collective bargaining. So I don't know what you guys think about any of that, but that's where my head is at. And of course, we're looking for the best ideas that people have out there to try to get this thing going. But I know we're going to have to exert some pressure. I know we're going to have to try to get some leverage. And I know we're going to have to try to get our president to take a different mindset going into this round of collective bargaining, because quite frankly, what we did last time didn't work. And that's how you got to start there, right? You got to start with last time coming out of the pandemic, coming out of 2023, where a lot of unions were making great advances, coming out of what's supposed to be the most labor-friendly White House in forever. That was our opportunity to really move this thing forward, and the results just weren't there. And so, no, we do not want to go through the same process again. No, we don't want to do it in the same way we've always done it. We've always done it this way, We're going to have to do something different here. So internally to the union, we get to that rap session in Cleveland. What are we rapping about? What are we talking about? What's our strategy going to be? What are we going to do as far as our tactics, as far as mobilizing our members, and as far as doing these different things? And then what is our strategy with the Postal Service? How do we get some influence, get some leverage? So what do you guys think about all that? Who wants to go first?
No, look, I think what you laid out is definitely a strategy. I mean, getting an audience with the American people, they still love letter carriers. Letter carriers still among the most trusted federal workers, right? And we have all these platforms, whether it be local radio, television, media, alongside our congressional reps. We have that network already built up. All these other labor coalitions. We should be bringing the conversation directly to the American people. They're seeing some cracks in the foundation, and they need to know why. They need to know what our experiences are working for the Postal Service, and the fact that this company isn't taking care of the employees like they should.
When you say they see some cracks, they're seeing diminished service, right?
That's being publicized every time you turn around, going viral. Some goofy situation that is embarrassing, but they don't know the backstory behind it, the pressures that people are under, and that's part of the story that's not being told.
And how they've made this job into a throwaway job, and you have throwaway employees doing the job, versus having professional career letter carriers as it's designed to be. I think that makes a difference, right?
Yeah, I do.
Ross,
I got a question, Mike. Yeah, I got a couple questions. Kind of piggyback on what Ronnie said. I mean, one of the cracks is the fact that, the cost of postage and everything just keeps rising. And given the current political climate we're in, with tariffs going to hit and all of our package, what's going to happen with our package volume? What's going to happen with all of that stuff? Do we have a plan as a postal service to to continue to deliver the service we have at the minimal cost to our customers and, you know, the US and whoever else we ship stuff to, you know. And I think that's something we don't deal with that in contract negotiations, but why is it not something we can't bring up to the Postal Service? You know, hey, let's talk about this for a minute, because, you know, you're cutting our service, the pay is not getting better, you're raising the cost. Where is all of that going?
Yeah.
You know,
No,
you know.
it's we probably should have a separate episode. And I firmly believe what you're saying. I agree with you 1,000%. We, the National Association of Letter Carriers, have to have a plan for the future of the
Right.
Postal Service that centers around having a uniformed public servant, you know, letter carrier, for lack of a better word, in every community in America at the minimum 6 days a week. And how do you do that effectively in this era of delivery, where the traditional delivery model that the Postal Service had is that we had a first class monopoly, which guaranteed certain revenues, which offset our universal service obligation. That is a burden on the finances of the Postal Service, but it's offset by your first class monopoly. And if you go back even further, it was offset by tax revenue. And so going forward, how do you plan to balance that revenue versus expenses thing with the Postal Service, so the Postal Service can continue to be the public delivery mechanism for all of America, meaning that everybody's going to receive the same level of service at a good, cheap price. But what I thought you were going to bring up is pertaining to contract negotiations is the American public. The American public having to pay more money is a direct result of the mismanagement of the Postal Service. The fact that they can't hire and staff and are forced to pay out all these exorbitant overtime penalty. I mean, there was a time when they never paid penalty overtime, right? And now they just, you know, it just flows freely, and now we got super penalty. Like, we're going in the wrong direction here. The amount of money they pay out in the grievance process, that should give us leverage. Like, no, you guys really need to fix this, because the American people who are floating the bill, who are, you know, having higher postage rates, or, you know, paying more for having their parcels delivered or whatever, you know, wherever the squeeze is at, you know, this is in the interest of everyone that the Postal Service actually manage this thing, actually comply with the terms of the contract. What is the cost when the Postal Service doesn't comply with the terms of the contract, and we're forced to file grievances and fight to get these additional remedies and all of that? All of that should give us leverage. That's the whole idea behind it, is all of that giving us leverage. So I think we can use some of that in contract negotiations, but I think separate from that, we also have to have a clear plan on how we think the Postal Service can be successful 5, 10, 20 years down the road. What else you got, Ross?
So two other questions. So obviously we're going to have an election for a new national NALC president, and we just got a new postmaster general. And honestly, we have not heard a lot from the new postmaster general. How much does his influence have in these negotiations? I know typically in the past we've dealt with Doug Tolino. Is he going to be the lead negotiator? Is our new postmaster general, what is his say going to be in this process? And what happens in an instance where Renfro starts these negotiations and then gets elected and voted out, and we still haven't completed the process? Is that a stop and go situation where we have a whole new, is he just gone, or does he finish the negotiations? Do we have that kind of, break glass in case of emergency situation, or do we start the negotiations all over again if it happens?
I don't know if there's any history to that type of situation. I just know that constitutionally, the president is over collective bargaining once you have a new president. So we will have, I was going to say a new president, but we could elect Brian Renfro again, and then he'd be our president for the new term. But the new term of office for president and all the national officers will be from December of 2026 to December of 2030. So if there's a change in who the president is, the president would then make, the new president, presumably, would make the decision on how they're going to conduct collective bargaining, who they're going to put in charge, and who they're going to have do different things or whatever. And obviously, the new president could say, I'm going to do things completely different, depending on where you're at in the process. But it's more than likely, in my opinion, that the process will be completed by then, because, you know, if you don't come to an agreement on May 22nd or whatever, you can start arbitration hearings, which is what we should have done in 2023. You can start arbitration hearings within 60 days, and you could have those hearings complete by the time that there's installation. You're going to have nominations for officers at the convention in August next year. Then you'll have the election in like September, October next year. And then you have the installation of the new officers in December. But the clock doesn't stop as far as the collective bargaining process. So I would presume that that thing is just going to keep rolling, and we're going to have to pick it up whenever we can pick it up. Now, one thing you can do, of course, is amend the Constitution at the convention in Los Angeles to limit the powers of the president pertaining to collective bargaining, which are unlimited at this point. You know, the president is over collective bargaining, end of sentence, right? That's the way the Constitution reads right now for the most part. But you could amend that, right? On the post office side, I think there's a huge unknown. We've not interacted enough with the new Postmaster General to really have any idea, any feel for what type of approach he's going to take. I don't think we know that at all. Doug Tolino, as you mentioned, traditionally has been, right now he's the Deputy Postmaster General. You know, he's traditionally the Vice President over Labor Relations with the Postal Service for many, many, many years. Been involved in contract negotiations with all the unions for many years. If he's still in that position, if he's still, you know, hasn't retired or whatever, then I would assume he would be the person we're dealing with. But sometimes the Postmaster General gets involved, you know. Sometimes you can make the Postmaster General get involved and say, hey, you know, they're messing this thing up. We need some help. We need you to get in on this because, you know, they're running this thing into the ground. They're not making good decisions over there. So I don't know how that would play out. Or if, you know, there could be they could clean house is what I'm getting at, right? You know, you got a situation where the president and the administration, the White House administration, has really made it clear that they plan on intervening. You know, they plan on getting involved in the post office, right? And so, would they possibly get involved in the collective bargaining process? Very possible. You know, what would that outcome be? We don't know. So that's a good question. You have more stuff?
I have one more. So we recently got our new agreement, you know, within the last 6 months, and they haven't
the purple
even
contract.
Yeah, they haven't. Well, they haven't even really put in place the systems from the last contract. So how do we as a union go into negotiations knowing, like, the 1260 payments, you know, the super penalty, as you call it? That was supposed to be a system that automatically paid people, and we were not supposed to have to worry about that. But they still have not got that system in place. So how do we as a union go into this, you know, this bargaining session and say, look, you guys still haven't even figured out how to implement the last stuff, you know? Or does the post office use that to their advantage and say, look, we're so far behind, we haven't even gotten that stuff implemented. Sorry, all we're giving you is a pay raise, and then you're going to have to deal with it. You know, how do we go in as a union and say, look, is that leverage for us, or is that leverage for the Postal Service? You know, when we go in and say, hey, you know, you didn't get this done, let's see what we can do to make this process better, because clearly we gave you that opportunity and you failed.
I would
So
say
what do we
it's
do?
not leverage for either side, but it is a reflection of the dysfunction that exists and has existed for a while now. And so I'll try to break it down to a level. Like, a lot of us have been involved in local negotiations. And so it's kind of similar. You go in there with the postmaster, and let's say you're negotiating over the vacation scheduling. The fact that they haven't been doing the vacation scheduling right, or it hasn't been working, does that give you more leverage or less leverage? I don't know, but it gives you an opening to say this isn't working. We have to, set up a different method of doing this, different parameters or whatever. I mean, at the end of the day, we just want the thing to work, like the wage scale should work. The processes should work. You come to work and do your job like the M41 says, and, have peace and dignity and respect in the workplace and, that kind of thing. So to the extent that it's not working, I think you try to negotiate a better way, and also, make sure that the Postal Service recognizes that left to their own devices, they're not able to do it. So what do you need in a grievance process? This is a question this is a way you would pose questions to the Postal Service. What do you guys need in a way, a manner of grievance process where you're going to be actually able to comply with the terms of the contract, and where there is a violation, you're going to be able to fix those things? Your management team, the people that you guys have hired, the ones that you've put in these positions, how can we structure this thing so that it actually works? What is your ideas? And like I said, right now they don't have any ideas because they don't care. They don't care about the result. But if you can get them there, if you can get into that collective bargaining mindset, I think those are the type of questions you would ask, and you would say, look, the way we've been doing it, the way you guys been doing it, it doesn't exactly work. So kind of try to turn that into some leverage, I think. But on its, by itself, I don't know if it represents leverage or not. So, what do you guys think about? I know this is a volatile subject, but what do you think if you go to your average carrier and talk about going out on strike, or what does your average carrier think if you have a discussion about what do you do when you get to the point where it's just unacceptable, the terms and the working conditions? Because that's what happened in 1970. At some point, the carriers were like, this ain't going to work for us. We can't just continue to work in the same way. Is there a breaking point for us? Is there a point where, where it just, where just you get to the point where you have to talk about, what do you call it, Jim? Labor unrest, or like, how do you bring that into the equation to get us some leverage? Jim, you got to unmute. Sorry. I told you to mute. Now I'm telling you unmute.
Mike, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said, for our new employees, the pay just isn't acceptable anymore. But there's really a division there. If you go to a carrier who's top step and on the overtime desired list, they're pretty content with their pay. Maybe they don't love it. Maybe they would have liked bigger raises. But trying to convince those carriers to go out on strike, I think, would be a struggle. That said, I know a lot of younger carriers, people who are in steps, B and C and D, and those people are living with their parents if they're single income. And that didn't used to always be the case, but there's a lot of single income carriers at that bottom half of the pay scale at this point. And they're either living on overtime or they're living with their parents because you can't make ends meet. $22 an hour doesn't pay $1,500 in rent. It doesn't leave anything left over when you have two paychecks and one of them's $1,500 and that's all your rent, and the other $1,500 is supposed to be food in a car and insurance and everything else we got to pay for in life. It doesn't leave anything for them to wiggle around in, and that vice is just getting tightened on them. Every day, every year, the price of everything just keeps going up. I look at those people and say that's where we still need to make more gains for the new employees, because you shouldn't have had worked for the post office 4, 5, 6 years and still can't afford to move out of mom and dad's basement. And that's where they're at right now. A lot of them are there.
And honestly, that's what makes the job untenable, because it leads to the staffing issues. You have this constant huge turnover, and the people that are at the high end of the pay scale, you say, well, hell, they're not arguing or complaining about the pay normally. I mean, everyone wants to make more, of course, but you might not be complaining about the pay if you're at the top end of the scale, but nothing works right. And because the pay is so low at the bottom end of the scale, you have people constantly quitting. People don't come to work. They're not hiring professionals, but they don't give the 473 battery test no more. So you really have to solve the problems at the lower end of the pay scale in order to solve the problems for the people on the high end of the pay scale. Look at all the stress on the job. Look at all the, just like I say, the staffing issues and the mandatory overtime and just the constant battling that goes on because it doesn't work right. I think it's in everyone's interest to correct the issues at the bottom bottom parts of the pay scale, not just the people that are at the bottom, but it's in all of our interests to correct those issues.
Mike,
go ahead.
How does the arbitrator selection process work, and do you think it's likely that we'll select arbitrator Nolan again?
Well, it works that the parties have to come to an agreement, or you can go to I think it's the Federal Mediation and Reconciliation, whatever. You go to some entity and you say, pick an arbitrator for us. And of course, the parties themselves pick. This is a 3-party panel, so 3 tripartite arbitration panel. We pick one, the Postal Service picks one, and then the neutral is either agreed to by both parties or you go to that other system, which I think for the most part, the parties end up agreeing to a neutral arbitrator. But how we've done this, I really have a problem with it. I think if you're trying to get to a non-status quo result, right? I think the way you framed it, Jim, was like these mediocre raises, over and over again, and you're really not fixing all the problems. If you're not content with the status quo, you don't pick a neutral arbitrator that is the epitome of the status quo, right? Like, if you were to take a picture of status quo, it would be like, oh, here we are. So I think you would go in another direction, and I hope we would go in another direction. I would also like to see us think about who we're picking as our arbitrator. And I think it should be somebody who knows our issues, who can get in. The 3 of them are back there discussing stuff, right? The neutral arbitrator and our person and the Postal Service person. I like a person who really knows our issues back there in that room that can say, no, that ain't going to work, or we've tried that before, or, practically speaking, this is not a workable way of doing this, kind of thing. So, yeah, I think there's needs to be some changes in how we do that process. But once again, the president is 100% over the collective bargaining process, and we've had very little success up until now affecting his manner of decision making, which to me is very frustrating because the president works for us, but he's been insistent on kind of mansplaining everything to us and telling us how we just don't understand the great strategy or the way we do things up here at headquarters and, that kind of thing. So I challenge every member of the union to, when you run into President Renfro, ask him that question. How are you going to do this thing differently so we can get different results? Tell me, break it down to me. Tell me like I'm a 3-year-old. How are you going to do this thing differently so we can get different results in 2026? Because that is the unanswered question out there for sure.
In Arbitrator Nolan's award, he talks a lot about judicial restraint and that's sort of the strategy arbitrators have adopted, and then proceeds to give us raises that were practically identical to the tentative agreement. Was it predictable that he was going to adopt the strategy, that position of exercising judicial restraint with financial? Was that something we should have anticipated from his history? I mean, clearly at this point, I think if we get him again, he's going to throw those same words at us again. And not that, the raises were not below normal, but they weren't, they were only, at the tiniest fraction above normal. Saying they were the highest one since 2006 was true by 0.1% or something like that. But my other question is, if we could predict that he was basically going to give us those numbers, then why not take all of our issues in? If the Postal Service is going to scream poverty and say, no, we can't afford to give you all the stuff that you want, then why not open up all the rest of the contract and say, great, you owe us that money, whether you can afford it or not. And since you can't give us the money, hey, how about you give us, an Article 8 that's more functional for us, or an Article 15, or transfers for without conditions, or all the other little things that we could get if we know we're not going to get any more money out of this next arbitrator, and that the Postal Service is going to cry poverty. Can't we at least make some gains on all of those other issues that are important to letter carriers that we bring up at all the national convention, and sign all of these or pass all these resolutions that say, hey, we want you to do X, Y, Z, or try to negotiate that? If all we're going to negotiate is the financial aspects, and they're just going to give us a 1.2% raise again next time, maybe isn't it time to open the door to all of those other things and at least try to make some headway somewhere in the contract? Yeah, it felt like we sacrificed on money beyond what we were due just to keep up with inflation and maintain the status quo of pay for letter carriers. And then it seemed like most of the contractual changes were really concessions as well. I mean, why are we digging out of our hole twice?
Yeah. So, to expound a little bit on your point, why do we allow for management to be in charge of the hiring process in Article 3? And the result is that they do a horrible job of it. And then the end result is mandatory overtime for a letter carrier because the post office didn't staff the place right. Like, how does that work contractually, right? How is it that the employer is allowed to have a uniform requirement and they're not forced to pay the cost of the uniform requirement that they have, and they're not even forced to sit down and come up with a new idea or a new way of doing the uniform? So how is any of that permissible? And I think Ronnie said at the beginning, what's maddening for every letter carrier is, they're not paying us right, and they don't treat us right. The job sucks and nothing works right, in addition to, the pay not being what it used to be, which, for the record, you were firmly in the middle class about 4 years into this job. And now it's like 10, maybe 12 years sometimes before you're firmly in the middle class in this job. And that's a huge damn difference. But I think that I don't agree with the people that say that if you bring too many issues to arbitration, you're going to have a trade-off there. I think that you present to the arbitrator or the arbitration panel and you say, these are all issues that we want to work collectively with the Postal Service to resolve. And the economic stuff is separate from any of these issues, right? So the transfer program, the Postal Service right now has a transfer program. We're not proposing anything that's going to add any cost to their transfer program, but we are going to propose a transfer program that works better, so that one of the benefits of the job when you work for United States Postal Service is that you can move around so that people can exercise the benefit that's already there. We're not asking for any additional burden on the part of the Postal Service. So you kind of compartmentalize your different things and have these presentations to the panel and have these discussions behind closed door with the panel on how you get there, but you keep it just about that particular issue, and then you move on to another issue. And you say, hey, we want to talk about this issue next. There's not an issue that we have that the Postal Service doesn't also have. Everything that affects us also affects the service, also affects the bottom line, also affects, everything that goes into the management of the Postal Service. So I don't agree with that. And I think that when we agree to a contract like we did this time, even though President Renfro keeps insisting it's an arbitration award, we agreed to that thing. We had the right to say, no, this is not sufficient, and I'm going to show you, Mr. Neutral Arbitrator, why it's not sufficient. We had the right to put on testimony. We had the right to, call witnesses. We had the right to make an actual arbitration hearing about over some of the things that we wanted to accomplish. At the very least, we had the right to make arbitration hearing over the all-career model, not allowing for the continuation of the non-career versus the career in the different offices. At least we could have put that issue forward, which was probably our number one issue. But anyway, we decided to accept those terms. And the problem is, once you accept that, now you're saying this is acceptable. The transfer program is acceptable to us. The grievance process is acceptable to us. It's acceptable to us that the post office doesn't staff the office properly, and then our people are forced into mandatory overtime when they want to go home. We said that was acceptable to us. So I think that you have to start off by saying this is not acceptable. We're going to tell you on day one of negotiations that this is not acceptable, and you're either going to work with us or we're going to work with this neutral arbitration panel to change these terms so that we can get from unacceptable to acceptable. And you try to have that leverage, like you were saying in the beginning, Jim, is like, hey, we got to have some leverage where they're scared, someone is, that something bad is going to happen to them, if they don't accomplish this. I mean, at the very least, the American public should fire the Postmaster General if he can't work collectively with the letter carriers to solve these issues so that the American people can go back to getting more reliable, mail service from professional letter carriers versus a lot of the issues that we have out there right now. Ronnie, you look like you were going to say something. Oh, Jim.
Oh, Mike, I was going to say you're on the committee for Article 7, aren't you?
Yeah, 7, 12, and 26.
Well, we're seeing these rampant route adjustment processes. It's all across the country, from what I understand, where they're just shredding all of these routes to save money. And we've had Article 7 maximization's been pretty worthless since the DOS award came out, because we don't get those conversions. And when they got rid of all the reserve regulars, it's really hard for us to get full-time people. But we have a lot of PTFs and CCAs who are working full-time hours. And what would be great is a maximum. Yep. I'm gonna be the rank and file committee of one here. But what would be really great is if the number of full-time letter carriers in a given station or installation was simply based on the number of hours being worked by city letter carriers in that installation.
That's
it. When it hits a threshold that's this number for this period of time, you convert one more person, and that's it. And it makes sense because the work is there. If the work is there, then we should have full-time positions for it. And the maximization was never great with the, over a certain period. I mean, it should be over a certain period of time, but in an office like Aurora, where the largest office in my branch, we have 100 and something routes. They just did a route adjustment, eliminated 8 routes. The number of work hours actually went up, and they had that report, right? And the work hours went up. So you didn't actually eliminate any routes. All you did was do some funny money math to do it. We can take all of the wind out of their sails of the route adjustment process with the maximization rule like this that says, we don't care what fun math you do. You're going to have this many full-time carriers for this many hours of work. And it makes sense. And I think it's an argument we could put in front of an arbitrator and say, the hours are here. If you get to this many hours, they can clearly support this many full-time carriers. Over the course of the last, year, they never worked fewer than this many hours in a day total. They should never have fewer than that number divided by 8 letter carriers in that office, plus, days off. So another 20% over that.
So Jim, it's just the irony of this whole thing. So what I talked about in the beginning is we had over 200 proposals last time. So it wasn't like we didn't know what we wanted to accomplish or what we, wanted to try to bargain for. I can tell you, I'm positive that we put forth that very proposal that you just mentioned, that number of full-time assignments should be based on the work hours in that installation. Additionally, there's so many problems with that full-time opportunities memorandum. You're waiting for a residual vacancy. There's no time limit on how long they're considering transfers. the delay of the first day of the third full pay period, blah, blah, blah. All that is delaying what should be is the right number of full-time assignments. But you make a great point in that even if you applied the 738 language, it's flawed because it says there should be one full-time regular for every full-time assignment, which means when they alter the routes or whatever, you lose full-time assignments, even though you don't lose work hours sometimes, you end up with less full-time regulars than you're supposed to have. And especially if we're going to seed the CCA classification, we definitely should have the right number of full-time regulars in the installation because that shortens the time that anyone is going to spend as a non-career CCA and gets them into that, full-time regular career status. If we're going to seed that, we definitely have to have what you're talking about with the full-time regulars. But we put forth that proposal. I know that proposal was on the president's desk, and the president was on a leave of absence in 2023 between March and June of 2023. But the acting president, Executive Vice President Paul Barner was there. And when President Renfro returned, that proposal was sitting on his desk along with a lot of other proposals. And somehow, some way, after 2 years or 20 months or whatever that time frame was, we got to March 21st of 2025, and none of that stuff was in the contract. None of that stuff that we had put forward. So, but keep putting forward what you're saying. It's an excellent proposal. But also, I'll say this again, every letter carrier that's listening to this thing, every single interaction you have with President Renfro, ask him the question, how are we going to accomplish our bargaining goals this time around? How? What are you going to do differently? How are we going to get there? Because it's not like these proposals haven't been out there. It's not like we haven't had resolutions from our conventions, every year going back to 1970. That's not the problem. The problem is how do we actually get there? Ronnie?
Yeah, no,
Jim, you got to go on
gonna-
mute, Jim.
I was just gonna kind of reiterate that closed mouth doesn't get fed, and we're not bringing these things to the table beyond committees. But it sounds like all these proposals, maybe there are some discussions with the Postal Service, but then that never moves.
Well, we don't know.
forward.
So what I don't know is, so we had internal committees internal to the union, just like we have now, right? You have these bargaining committees. These are NALC only committees, whether they're executive council, rank and file, blah, 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 right? These are letter carriers and union officials coming up with proposals. What happens when or if or how you actually have these discussions with the Postal Service? I could not tell you because we were not part of that process whatsoever in the last round of contract negotiations. And I don't know what the plan is going to be, in 2026 on that.
Yeah, from what I can remember, sitting in on some COPs, Barner took the work rules part of the negotiation, right? And so I'm assuming he's armed with all these proposals from the committees and having a conversation. But you're right, I guess that hasn't really been spelled out as clear, because the way I understood it was Renfro was negotiating about the compensation, and the work rules was Barner. So just between the two of them, that made, I guess, the bargaining committee.
Well, there's a couple of things on that, and not to cut you off, but so for example, before you can figure out how you're going to negotiate, say, Article 7, you have to know the answer to the question, are there going to be CCAs, yes or no? Is everyone going to be in the all-career model? Are we going to CCAs, PTFs? What are the job classifications going to be? Because then you get into the negotiation over the nuts and bolts of Article 7. So you really can't do that until a decision is made at what they call the main table. The other thing I was going to bring up is that traditionally, and I believe this was the case last time, and it's been the case, and I've been involved in 3 rounds of contract negotiations, I think 1, 2, 3, I think 4. This will be the 4th one. But every time the answer that I've gotten, either directly or indirectly, is that we bring issues to the Postal Service, and if they're not open to talking with us about them, we shelve them. We put them
It's
in
just guys
the
right there.
we put them in the round file because we have no confidence that we can win any of these issues, or that it's even in our interest to bring any of these issues forward in interest arbitration. That somehow if we bring forth these non-economic issues, that will hurt our economic proposals at interest arbitration. So if that's going to be your theory, it doesn't really, there's not much discussion going on with the Postal Service on some of these things. Does the Postal Service have an interest in making sure we have the right number of full-time regulars in the contract? No, they do not. And so if they don't want to talk about it, and you don't have like a plan B, if they don't want to talk about it, you're never going to get there. You're never going to get there. So does that frustrate you enough? Because it's maddening to me.
Yeah, now you asked a question earlier about how people feel about potentially going out, walking off the job. I hear it all the time.
Do you? I wonder.
Oh yeah, yeah. People are at that point. So it's a well past the breaking point. You can see by the offices we visit. I think they're kind of like silently taking off and either quitting with their feet or some type of protest by not showing up like like you would expect.
So I got an idea, and I know I shouldn't do this, but I'm just gonna throw it out there. I should like run it by the campaign committee first and see if it's sound or whatever. But this is just Mailman Mike speaking. This ain't the candidate for president or whatever. I think we should, and Ronnie, if you recall, last year when Octavia Redmond was assassinated out there in uniform, we held a rally at the Union Hall the next day. The very next day, was it? It was the next working day, whatever, I think.
Right.
And I think the rally started at like 8 o'clock or whatever time it was going to start. And people said, well, what about if I'm supposed to punch in at that time? Like, do I have to be off work? And we were like, just go when you're done. Just go there. Like, this is what we're doing. This is of significance. And so my idea would be to let the Postal Service know that on the day that negotiations begin, not a single letter carrier is going to punch in until you guys start negotiating. So if you guys want to start at 6 a.m, that's great. Everyone will be on time that day. If you want to lollygag and start that shit at 11 a.m. or something, that's fine. We're going to sit outside every single post office in America and wait for you guys to start negotiations, and then we'll go in and begin our tour. It's not a strike or nothing like that. It's not a job action. It's just like, hey, this is important to us. It's important that you actually engage in the collective bargaining process and fix some of these problems that are destroying our future and our livelihood. And we're willing to wait until that time. I don't know. What do you think about something like that? Is that crazy, or is that something that might be feasible?
Well, I think it's feasible to the extent that people would absolutely do that. They would absolutely fall in line to do that. If that's what we're going to do, that's our part of our strategy to get the things kicked off the way they should be. I think plenty of people will fall right in line with that and do that. Whether it's something that we want to do, you're right. It would be more conversations to see what that would look like. But like with Octavia Redmond, the parking lot was packed. People showed up.
Yeah,
they found their way to their routes. The mail got delivered.
All the mail got delivered.
But yeah, for that moment, for as long as we needed to be out there, we were out there, and that's significant.
So one thing we definitely can do and should do is prior to the start of negotiations, which will be, I think, like, we don't know the exact date, but probably it'll be the week of February 23rd, we'll officially begin contract negotiations. So February the 15th and 16th is a holiday weekend. And so What I would like to see is every single branch, every single post office, as many people as you can, send them to Washington, D.C. And we need to do that 1.3 mile march from NALC headquarters to USPS headquarters, if that's where the negotiations are going to begin, or from USPS headquarters to NALC headquarters, if that's where the negotiations are going to begin. But, every letter carrier and every branch, send people, bring your signs, bring your demands, bring your issues, and we all get together on that Sunday. And then we still have that Monday to travel back home or whatever, because it's, taking advantage of the holiday weekend. So I know that plan is in the works, and I think everyone should definitely get behind that. But that we need to think of anything that can help get us some leverage in this process, because otherwise we're screwed, that's not okay. That's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. Ross, you got something?
Yeah. So on that kind of thing, like, we're currently in a weird situation within the NALC that we're starting to see factions. We're starting to see groups split up, and like the idea is solid, but it's only going to work if we all do this together. We are a union, and it can't just be, oh, I support Mike for president, so I'm going to do this, or I support James Henry, or I support Renfro, because we're seeing a lot of that where it's like, okay, I'm CLC, I'm Caref, I'm Renfro, whoever.
You can't even say my name right. Damn, man.
I'm saying it like everybody else does. I'll say it a different way every time if you really want me to. But you understand what I'm saying, where like we are in a point politically and in our union that we are not all together. And I think we need to figure out a way to come together as a union, put the differences aside of who we like for national president, or who's negotiating, or what we want in a contract. We all have to be on the same page. And
I mean, is anyone legitimately going to be against us having a rally in Washington, D.C. on February the 15th, whatever that date is?
I don't know. I honestly don't know, but
who would say no to that?
I mean, it really is going to depend on who proposes it. Like I said, we have factions, and you know that. I mean, if Renfro says it, you might have the Renfro supporters do it. If you say it, you're going to have your people that are going to get behind it. You have the regions, you have the states, you have the union that is so divided right now. We are not a union. And I think we all want the same goal. We want to have a contract that supports us as letter carriers, that we can have a sustainable livelihood, not have to go get second jobs, not have to, depend on overtime. And right now we don't see that. In my opinion, we got sold out by our national president during our last negotiation. And I think a lot of people are upset with that. But I also see that now we have different groups of people that want different things from the union, when we all should want the same thing, right? We all want to have a good, solid paycheck every 2 weeks. We want to come to work free of harassment, free of, threats of not coming home because someone robbed us or harmed us in a situation. That's ultimately, that's all we want, right? As letter carriers, we want to go home. We want to do our 8 hours, go home, see our families, go to sleep, come back, do it again. We don't want to have to do our job, go do another job, do a third job because we can't afford.
But just, to go back to the point of what you call the factions or whatever. Look, man, everybody who is a letter carrier in the fraternal organization of the National Association of Letter Carriers has to stand for what's good for our fellow letter carriers. So I just don't see any scenario where there's someone who would stand up as a candidate for any office in this union and not be willing to support what we're planning on doing here to try to get ourselves a better contract. You know what I mean? I mean, if someone takes that position, you have to judge them accordingly, right? Like, if you're for the letter carriers, you're going to be out there advocating for actions like this. And specifically, if we plan this march on February the 15th, specifically, we're going to want anyone who is on the side of the letter carriers, specifically if you are a letter carrier, whether you're a candidate or not, to be out there and to support that. And so, I'm confident that anyone who is a candidate or a potential candidate would support that. If someone comes out and says they're not, then they need to be judged accordingly by their brothers and sisters of this union, 100%. I don't know, man, but I don't think we're gonna have that problem. I really don't see that. I think this is one of these things where, this union is very prepared to act differently to try to get different results. And this is all part of it.
So changing subjects just a little bit, you just got done with an executive council meeting for a week. What happened during that?
2 days.
2 days. Well, Labor Day was involved, and so I think the general membership wants to know kind of what happened during that. Why, as a rank and file person, why is all of this stuff so secret? Why do we have these meetings and then we have people say, hey, well, we can't really delve into that yet? Like, what is so important at these meetings that some of this information cannot be shared, and what was talked about in these executive council meetings?
Well, there was so the first day was the holiday. It was Wednesday. The first day we met was Wednesday, and we basically just met in the morning, and then in the afternoon is when we started working on these committees. You see the pictures on the website. Those are the pictures of us. That was Wednesday afternoon. So we really only met Wednesday morning, and then Thursday, each committee had their own kind of schedule or whatever. But we kind of, at least we did, continued with that, with that schedule. So you're not talking about a week of meetings. You're talking about a morning of meetings. Maybe like 3 hours. Most of that time we spent going over the issues in the dispute resolution process. And like I said, the president said, and I've heard him tell different delegations and different people that we plan to file a national grievance to enforce the terms of the dispute resolution process memorandum, which he's supposed to do anyway, per the resolution that passed at the convention in 2024, at least as far as when there's a situation where the Postal Service is refusing to activate backups, which is what's happening in real time. So, and there's other issues with the dispute resolution process that they're not following the terms of that memorandum. So we talked about what the different issues were. Everyone had a chance to kind of report out, and that was the guidance we got from the president. And so that was the majority of the time, man. And it wasn't much other time spent on much of anything. Why is everything such a secret? I don't know. It's not my philosophy. It won't be my philosophy if I'm elected the president of the union. I believe that the executive council works for the members of the union. The executive council is responsible for making decisions on behalf of the union in between conventions, and those decisions should be disseminated to the membership of the union immediately, either by way of like minutes or some type of summary of what was discussed and decisions that were made. And I think the executive council should have all type of subcommittees and different working groups and that kind of thing. But the president is the chair of the executive council, and that's the way he chooses to run the executive council. I think it's to the detriment of the union, and I think we're not very effective right now as a council. So that's where it's at. I don't know that there's any great accomplishment or great secret that's being withheld from you, because honestly, it's not much going on there, man.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, we hear from you every once in a while, hey, I got to go out to DC for an executive council meeting. And then it's like, oh, well, we talked about some stuff, but I can't share it. Region 3 has the calls, and oftentimes we have some national officers that get on and it's like, hey, we talked about this, but we can't really share that right now. So I know that we as a union have a good tool with the members only portal. Like, I get like collective bargaining. We hold that stuff closer to our chest, so we don't put all that information out there for the post office. But why can't we put that stuff on the members only tool? Why can't those things, like you're saying, be disseminated in something where people have to log on, they have to use a password? It's pretty like, that I'm logging on, I'm getting that information if you really want to check on that stuff.
There's going to be tons of resolutions to the convention next year in Los Angeles, and I'm sure there's going to be multiple ideas, resolutions, amendments to the Constitution that are going to reflect the members' desire for transparency and to know both the nature of the discussion that takes place at the Executive Council and the decisions that are made by the governing body of the NALC. And so, start putting together your proposals. And one thing we're going to do to the Care of campaign is we're going to send out to all the branches, a collection of these proposals and amendments and things that people are putting out there, so that everybody in every branch, there's 1,500 branches in this union, can start talking about what those different ideas are. And so transparency within the Executive Council, I think, is a big deal. And I think the way it works right now, it doesn't work for the members of the union, and it doesn't move us along, to the extent that it should. But it's also the personal preference of the current president. You know what I mean? So obviously, if you had a different president, you'd have a different way of doing it. Don't put me in there, man. I'll live stream the damn things. I don't see what the secret is at all. They have something called executive session, right? So executive session would be where you'd get in there and kind of have your little, you'd have your, if I want to talk shit about Ross and tell you who you really are, I can do that in executive session without it being a public record. But, the business of the Executive Council, why can't we just live stream the thing? Like, what is the secret? I'm with you on all of that, but
like C-SPAN, right? You can see everything that goes on in the House of
exactly.
Representatives. Why? I mean, that's not a secret. I mean, any government in the world can go watch C-SPAN and know what's going on in our House of Representatives.
Yep.
Are we doing something that's so much more secret than the House of Representatives that we can't share that to the membership?
I can tell you to the extent that there's things that I'm told not to share, I don't share them. But if I'm not specifically told not to share that thing, then I do share it, because I feel like every member should know what's going on with their Executive Council. But as you know, you do get those updates from me, and there's just not that much content to the updates. It's not because I'm not sharing the stuff. For the most part, it's because there's nothing to share. And that is the biggest problem, that the governing body of the NALC in between conventions is pretty non-functional at this point. Pretty non-functional, in my opinion.
I mean, you go out there. I mean, you were just out there for 2 days, right? And like you said, you met with committees. I mean, and now you took our dues monies and you met on committees. Was this something that, maybe could have been done via Zoom call, with your committee, your brothers, I don't know, your executive board counterparts, or even,
I mean, what we don't want,
there's
you can swing the other way, and you can have everyone micromanaging the thing, and you can have every Tom, Dick, and Harry member of the union, kind of chiming in, and you're like, oh my God, you can't, it bogs down the process, and you can't accomplish anything that way either. So, I mean, you got to let people work and do what they think is best. These are people you elected to represent you. And so I think you gotta have that, good balance there. But you should be aware of what they're doing, because they work for you. But specifically, I work for you. I'm the Region 3 business agent. So if I'm out in DC handling business on your behalf, I come back and report back to you what kind of business I handled, right? That's completely reasonable that you would have that expectation. I'm with you on that. All right, good people. We got anything else here? Sarah looks like she's like, they wrap this shit up. So, what's the wrap it up signal, Sarah? 2 hands. Wrap this thing up. Traditionally, we'll go around new a mic drop Monday tradition. Give everyone a last chance to speak, right? Sarah, is that okay? Is that okay with you?
It's perfectly fine with me.
Okay. All right. Well, as long as it's good with Sarah. Renee, you good with that?
Yeah, I don't know when we started that tradition, but yeah, go right ahead.
We did it when we had the we did it because you couldn't hear. That's what happened. In the Spanish episode, we did that at the end. We
Oh,
went
okay.
around
So
and
yeah,
you didn't know what we were talking about, but yeah, that's what we said. We said,
Oh, okay. Yeah, my Google Translator wasn't keeping up, so yeah.
cada persona tiene su chance de hablar sus últimas palabras, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
All right, you guys, final words. Final words. Who wants to go first? Jim? Jim raised his hand.
I even turned my mic off this time. Thanks for having me on, Mike. Renee told me that she wanted me to come on a telecon tonight to talk about the contract for about a half an hour. And I appreciate her, not telling me what it was, because I just assumed I was here to get chewed out about a Step B decision I wrote recently.
That was earlier today.
That was earlier today. But no, really, thanks a lot.
And she didn't, hey, Jim, she didn't say a half hour. What she said is until halftime of the Bears game. That's what she said.
Well, she got 11 seconds then.
Go ahead, brother. I'm sorry.
I'm
cutting
good.
you off.
Thanks.
Okay. Now, thank you. I appreciate you coming on, and you're always a wealth of knowledge, so I appreciate hearing from you as well. Ronnie.
Yeah, no, thank you all, Sarah, especially. Appreciate everything you're doing. I love the operation here. It's really top notch. I think it's been a great conversation, and it's kind of like it should be sparking some ideas. And so I expect that as people listen to this, if you have comments turned on, you'll get some good feedback. Appreciate Jim and his insight. I learn a lot every time I hear from Jim, smart dude, and Ross, and you too, man. Great group that you assembled here, and I guess I'm honored to be among everybody. And Renee, appreciate you too, even though I don't know what you look like. No, I do though. I do.
Yeah, come on, really?
I do.
Come on, really?
Hey, Ronnie, while you're speaking, I don't know if you want to try to plug this raffle and also maybe tell people, the sellers, what they need to do to make sure that those stubs are registered, as well as if people still want to get tickets, we got another payday coming up this week, what they need to do. Because you're heavily involved in that.
Right. No, the nationwide raffle, it's been in full gear now for what, almost a month and a half. Yeah, a little over a month. You can get online right now at careforprez.org and get your virtual tickets. As soon as you hit the homepage, you'll see so far how the ticket sales are going with this ranked choice voting type of process, and it's kind of cool. You get your choice of prize, whether you're pulled first or second or third or fourth. There's great prizes that are at your option. There's an iPad. There's a Ninja slushie. There's $500 in United Airline miles, and there is a Nintendo Switch. So really great prizes, of course. And then that hat that Mike's wearing, those are also being raffled off. And we've got a number of sellers across the country. They also be getting prizes based on the number of tickets that they sell, because we've got physical tickets out there and the virtual. And so if you've got a physical ticket and you're a seller, you want to hit the website. There's a dashboard for you to enter in your ticket stubs so that we'll have those and be ready to go and pull the number. There's a password that's associated with it. I don't think I should get a password on the show. So we'll
probably not. It would diminish the value of the password significantly.
Yeah, so that's all I'll say on that. But yeah, definitely get in. Great prizes for a good cause.
And the drawing will be next Monday.
15th, yeah. The 15th.
Right here on Mic Drop Monday. So you have to figure out how we're going to do the drawing, because all of the physical tickets get registered into the, digital system. through in the website. So everything, then you have to set up a, fake spinning of the ball or whatever to kind of circulate the numbers and however,
Yep.
I don't know. You got to think about, I guess, how we're going to do that, but we'll do it live next Monday. And maybe we'll have a live show, let people ask questions. I don't know. We haven't talked about what we're going to do next Monday, but at least that part of it will be live, right?
Yeah, that part. Yeah, we'll be ready to go.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
And I appreciate all the people out there. But we sent tickets out all over the place. So, really appreciate the people getting out there. And hey, the campaign does cost money. And so we don't got to raise all the money overnight, but slowly but surely. And this is a time where hopefully Letter Care's got a little bit of money in our pockets, based on just getting the back pay. So we tried to time this nationwide raffle with it. And we've already raised a good chunk of money, but still time left on the clock there. So appreciate you, brother, for that. Ross, I hate to say this is very dangerous, but I think you have the final word. I think that's the case.
Well, I assume you're going to talk a little bit more after I'm done.
I might have to. We'll see how this goes.
No, just thank you guys all for having me on. I was going to go to a Moulton Democrat meeting tonight, but you guys sent me a message wanting me to get on and talk about the contract and what was going on. So I appreciate the time. A lot of information was shared here. We have a lot of people on here. Well, at least 3 of you that have way more experience than myself with contracts and working at the post office. And it's always a good opportunity to kind of pick everybody's brain and kind of get ideas from, like we're talking about just the carriers that start at the bottom. And then of course we have carriers that are at the top, and we have some that are in the middle. And it's just kind of nice to have a group of people that we can kind of just talk about what we see, in all different areas, through our branches. Jim's in step B. So, he kind of gets cloistered away in a closet and sits and reads stuff all day. And, and Ronnie is working in branch 11, and, he's visiting the branches. He's talking to members, and, Mike's, doing his executive board thing, and he's running a region, that's pretty important. And Sarah and Renee are both helping out with the campaign and the podcast. And it's always nice to have a good conversation with people from all different walks in their union and postal career too. So.
All right, brother. Way to wrap it up, man. Good job. All right. Appreciate everyone. Thank you guys for taking the time. And what's the score of the Bears game?
Bears are leading 10-6.
Of course they are. Of course they are. All right. Onward to victory then. I will not be singing the theme song tonight, but, if you guys want me to do that in the future, we'll see what we can do for you. All right, everyone. Have a good night. Thank you.